Alright then, for some of you, this may be your last video you have to watch. This is problem 2. And the idea with this one is to work off of what you've already done in problem 1. So if you've already done problem 1, problem 2 is going to be really easy, a lot easier. A lot of it is more concepts, so there's a lot of stuff on the board. Don't worry if you can't see all of it at the moment. Really, it's just how to describe the process. A lot of it is very intuitive. As a mathematician or whatever major you are, you're going to find a lot of this very intuitive and not very hard to work with. A couple of things to move forward with. Profit. What is profit exactly? I'll just remind you that profit is what happens when the amount you sell it for is subtracted by the amount it costs to produce. So in this example, the cost to produce paper is 20 cents, but paper sells for 30 cents. So if you sell one paper, you've sold it for 30 cents, but it cost you 20 cents, so you've only made a profit of 10 cents. So now that you have that in mind, let's move forward. So in the problem, it has table 16. I have reproduced table 16. Now I have something extra on here called range. You have not got that on yours. And this is part of the process that you have to do. So the demand is 30, probability is 0.05 or 5%. Demand of 31, probability is 15%. Now, why did we have random number generators between especially 0 and, well, honestly 99, because mod 100 doesn't include the number 100 itself. So why did we do that? Well, I think you'll agree with me that if you have probabilities between 0 and 100% and you assign them to different demands so that it all adds up to 100%, you could assign them ranges. So, for example, a probability of 5% for the demand 30. If you got around a number that fell between 0 and 4, including 4, so like let's say you get a number through your random generator and the number you get is 2, then the demand for that day will be 30 because it fell in the range. For demand 31, the probability is 15%, so you add 15 to 4, you're going to get 19. Now, keep in mind, this 4 is not really honest. It's more like greater than 4. So something like 4.01 would be in this range, but 4 itself is not really in this range. It's in this range. So keep that in mind. If you feel like you could write this differently, where you have like, bracket, bracket, and then circle, bracket. I mean, not circle, parentheses, bracket. Kind of like you've seen with different ranges. If you feel more comfortable doing that, feel free to. This is how it would look in a computer setup, though. Like say, demand 32, probability is 22%, so you add 22 to 19, you get 19 to 41, and you continue that all the way until you get to 99. If you go above a 99, you've made a mistake somewhere. And you'll just have to fix it so that these numbers match. I made that mistake first, where these numbers didn't match, but these numbers should match. So, and then you're good to go. So, moving forward, you've already produced those 10 numbers. We're only going to need 7 of them, and the first one being the number they already gave you. The problem asked us to start out with a demand of 32, so I was like, alright, I will just randomly choose a number, let's say 31. 31 happens to exist in the demand of 32. I chose 31 because that's the problem before. That's what they had already done for us. So let's just work with that, save ourselves some work. So we got a 31 when we randomly generated. We got the next number to be 70, and then you plug that 70 into the next number, and then you get 33, 4, 11, 30, 53, until you've generated like 6 of these days. You've done 10, hopefully, but I'm just worried about 6 days for this problem. So these numbers, each of these random numbers, 31 obviously, we said you can assign that, so that's a demand of 32. Perfect, that's what they asked for. Now the first day that we want to worry about, 70 is what number we got. So where do we go? We go to our list, we go to our range, and we say, 70 falls between 41 and 79. All right, there's a demand of 33 on that day. All right, this day, there's 33 is the random number. All right, awesome, that's between 19 and 41. There's a demand of 32. Oh, there's a random number of 4. Hey, range of 0 to 4. Or is it this one? Remember I said the range, this is the one that includes the range of 4, not this one. So range, when the random number is 4, it's going to go into this one, not this one, this one, and that'll be demand of 30. Awesome. and we just generate those. Easy enough for computer to do, just say, do that stuff. Easy enough for you to do. So the idea behind this one is basically this paper producer has decided, hey, what if I match the demand of the last day and I make that my production for the next day? So let's say the demand yesterday was 32, so I'm going to produce 32. Let's say the demand for yesterday, you produce 32, and then let's say that day you sell, 30, so you produce too many. All right, cool, we're going to produce 30 for the next day. Let's look at that a little bit better here. So the first demand was 32, right? And that's what we were given with to start. Well, cool, so we produced 32. But it turns out the next day we actually needed a demand of 33, which means we sold all of our papers, but there was one customer who wasn't happy. We would consider this a cost of opportunity cost, which would mean you would usually assign a value of like 5 cents in this example. Your credit for paper back, which is what happens when they say you get a 10-cent credit. So if you don't happen to sell all your papers, you can sell your papers you didn't sell back to the production facility for half the cost it was to actually produce them. That will help you kind of alleviate some of the stress. But cost of opportunity cost, you would have as usually like half of that, so you'd have 5 cents. For this problem, we're not going to worry about that. They don't want us to ask. They didn't ask us to worry about that, so we won't worry about that. So 33, you didn't have enough papers. Okay, we're going to produce 33 then. Next day, you've produced 33, but there's a demand of 32. Uh-oh, you produced too many papers. You're able to sell 32, but you produced one too many papers, so you're going to have to sell one back. So you actually end up losing 10 cents, and that sucks. But you did make a profit, it's just that you didn't make as much of a profit. The next day, so you say, okay, the demand was 32, so I'm going to produce 32. Turns out that day you only sell 30. Well, you've just produced 2 extra papers, and now you have to sell back 2 extra papers. So, next day you produced 30 as the demand matched, but this day it was 31. Okay, well, turns out customer's unhappy because you were able to sell 30 papers, but there was one customer who didn't get his paper or her paper. Okay, so you produce 31 the next day, you get 32. Once again, you produce 31, you needed 32, so you're going to lose a customer. 32, you produced 32, demand was 33. This is a good setup because at least it's an upward trend, but you're constantly not producing enough papers, which is a bit rough. So let's go back to the profit. So if you got a demand of 32, he would produce 32, and then that day he would have 33. So that would mean he would produce 32 and he would lose a business to somebody, but that doesn't really mean anything in our profit scenario because it means he made 32 papers and sold 32 papers. Sweet! So he made a profit of $3.20. Next day, he made a profit of $3. Day after that, profit of $2.60. Whoa, why was that so low? If you remember here, it was a -2, where it went from he produced 32 papers and he only sold 30. So it makes sense that he's making less that day because he's having to sell back. Now, interestingly enough, he does sell back. So you actually add 10 cents to anything, but his profit would be like that, where you're considering the cost. You can make it a little bit higher with that 10 cents. Here I have not, but you may. Moving forward, you get $3.10. You'll get $3.10, $3.20. Because as it turns out, he just makes more profit, even if some of the customers aren't as happy. If there's an upward trend, he is going to make more. But what if he, for example, had a demand of like 35 one day, and the next day he had a demand of 30? Oh, that's going to be a big hit. He's going to be losing 50 cents that he would have made. Because he does get that 10 cents back, so not the worst. So what is this all about? Well, we wanted to find the average profit. Turns out the average profit is $3.02 in this scenario. Okay, cool. So, it turns out basically he's going to be making $3 no matter what in 6 days. Now, the benefit of a simulation with a computer is that it doesn't just do 6 days. It can do 30 days. It can do 1,000 days. Keeping in mind, though, that'll make it more accurate, yes, for the simulation. And simulations can have different results, so you want to run multiple cases of a simulation. That takes a while, and it costs money. It costs money to develop a simulation, but you can test out different questions. Like, the question was, what would be the average profit if production matched the previous day's demand? We have answered that. Pretty simple enough. It's not exactly optimizing. It's more like risk management, deciding, like, is this a good attempt at how much you should produce? Maybe, but maybe we could have some better scenarios. Well, what happens if, like, let's say a hurricane happens and you sell nothing? Well, you can't really account for that in your simulation, except you can. Weather is something you can account for in simulation. You just kind of have to manually code it in, and you have to say, hey, sometimes this is going to happen. It doesn't actually affect it necessarily, and maybe you notice something like a trend, like, hey, after a hurricane hits, or before a hurricane hits, people buy papers like crazy, but after the hurricane hits, maybe nobody buys papers, or maybe huge skyrocket in papers. So you can have a simulation accounting for things. Any variable you can think of, you can account for. The trouble is that you need data, or we would like data. And that data is how we make our demand and probability charts. And that's how we can get our ranges, and that's how we can get our simulation up and running. The next problem is going to deal with making some of the demand and probability things. It's a little bit harder because you're going to have to use things like the inverse transform method and the acceptance rejectance method, which is essentially how you are going to make these curves, probability curves. So you can have, like, up, down, you can have parabolas, you can have whatever you want, but you need to make your formulas work with it. And there's a few tricks we have for doing that. We won't really deal with acceptance rejection method very much. We will work with inverse transform method, and that's essentially integrating piecewise functions, something from calculus, so not too complicated. If you feel like tackling that, go ahead and check for the third video, but if you don't feel like going on with it, that's fine. This is the main point of the chapter, in all honesty. This is the main stuff you can do as a mathematician. The inverse transform method, I urge you to try. It's not that bad and should be easy enough for us to solve. But moving on, you're going to need to know simulation languages. You're going to need to start learning things if you want to continue a simulation. We won't cover that here, but if you wanted to continue, you'd need to start learning, okay, how do I plug this into the computer? How do I plan for it? A lot of the simulation chapter is about planning for these things. Planning for your demand and probability. How do you do that? You have to be taking data. These processes can take actual months. Sometimes faster, depending on, your circumstances. Kind of up to you to figure that out. We're not able to cover that here, though. So for now, if this is where you're ending your series, thank you for watching, and I hope you have a good rest of your summer. If you're going to continue on, I look forward to seeing you in the next video. See ya!